How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you would like to be on the program, I would be delighted to have you. Before I move on, because I'm going to move on from discussing Thanksgiving, I'm going to go to Tammy. We'll let Tammy through here, and then we got other stuff to talk about. So, Tammy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Eric. I am great. Thank you for having me.
Glad to.
Well, you explained Thanksgiving beautifully at the beginning of your show, but it reminded me of another explanation I got this weekend. It was from my 5-year-old grandson, Hudson. My husband and I live in Forsyth County. Hudson lives over in Jersey, Georgia. You probably know where that is. And he is in the lottery-funded pre-K at Walnut Grove Elementary. And we had the great pleasure of going to his basketball game this weekend and then bringing him home for a sleepover with us. And as we were driving, I asked him, Hudson, what are you guys studying in school right now? And he said, we're learning about Thanksgiving. I'm like, oh, my gosh, well, that's fantastic. Tell me, what about Thanksgiving? And he said, well, Grand Tam, that's my grandma's name. Well, Grand Tam, a long time ago, some people lived in a different country, and their king said to them, you're going to go to this church. And they said, we don't want to go to that church. So they got in a boat, and they sailed across the ocean, and they came here. And it was really hard for them because they really didn't know the land. They didn't know what things to eat and what things would grow. But they made friends with the Indians, and they helped them along there. And they became friends with them and had a big thank you dinner, and that was the first Thanksgiving. So I looked at my husband and I was like, did our 5-year-old grandson just explain tyranny, the quest for freedom, and celebrating all that in one fell swoop? So I was so proud of him, obviously. And,
well
and
done.
It restored my faith in public education, I will say.
I got to tell you, though, you said you probably know. Nope, I didn't know there was even a place called Jersey, and now I'm looking at the map, and I'm sure I have driven through there, north of Social Circle. I am positive I've driven through Jersey and did not know that it was actually a place.
Yeah, it's a special little place. It's kind of reminds us of what Forsyth County looked like when we moved here 30 years ago, and that's all changed now, of course. You know, progress, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is okay. So, Tammy, listen. First, thanks for the phone call, and for those of you who don't understand Tammy's reference at the end, so Forsyth County, Georgia, is north of Atlanta, and it was a fairly rural ag community and just exploded in the last 20 years. It just is booming now. So many people and so much traffic, and it's a wonderful area with a whole lot of wonderful people. Now, we've done the Thanksgiving. I got to move on because I want to play for you something. Seb Gorka, he's blocked me on social media. I've never been a big fan of his. He was a national security guy, got a radio show, and has left to go into the Trump administration, giving up radio. And Seb Gorka he was doing an interview about Ukraine. I'm going to pause before I get to his audio. Here's something that I've been saying to you for a while. The Biden administration foreign policy is built around fantasy. And the fantasy that the Biden administration has peddled for so long is that if the United States would just get out of the way, we could have peace in the world. And it derives from the Barack Obama sense of redefining American foreign policy so that we are just one of 198 countries. We're no better than the others. So we exercise some false humility to claim that everybody is equal when they're not. And we're going to tie everything to human rights like Jimmy Carter did. It's just been a disastrous foreign policy. It was a disastrous foreign policy when Jimmy Carter tried it. It's a disastrous foreign policy now. And one of the things the Biden administration has done that people on the left and people in the press cannot comprehend is he has actually made the situation in Ukraine worse. The situation in Ukraine is cascading towards World War III in large part because Joe Biden decided to be the Neville Chamberlain of Ukraine. What did Joe Biden do to make it bad? Joe Biden told Ukraine he would give them armaments that he never delivered. Joe Biden told other nations not to give Ukraine armaments they wanted. Joe Biden gave Ukraine armaments that it wanted and then said, you're not allowed to use them. Joe Biden dithered and dragged his feet constantly. He dragged things out. He blames Congress every time, and it's just not true. Members of Congress on the Republican side who very much support Ukraine have vented their frustrations to me for a very long time that Joe Biden is all talk and no action when it comes to Ukraine. And the result is that the Russians knew that they could cross every red line that Joe Biden set because Joe Biden was not going to enforce any red lines. And now where has it led us? To having North Koreans camped out on the border with Ukraine, ready to cross the border. What is the solution to this? The solution to this is to tell the Russians, if you don't come to the table and come up with a peace deal, and tell the Ukrainians, by the way, you're going to give up some territory. We're sorry, but you are at this point. Tell the Russians, if you don't come to the table and get a peace deal, we're giving the Ukrainians every single weapon they want and telling them to use them. Why? Because this war has been extremely costly for the Russians. They've lost an inordinate number of men. They're pulling people out of prison now and shipping them off to Ukraine and telling them, if you don't die, you'll get free. They've got a situation now with the North Koreans. The North Koreans have had to come in and help the Russians. And ironically, I thought it was a joke. It's really not. The Ukrainians have been airdropping phones for the North Koreans already loaded with pornographic websites. They've never seen porn before, and they are highly addicted. They don't want to go back to North Korea anymore either. Seb Gorka was doing an interview with the Times, the British Times. This is him. This is grown-up foreign policy in action.
I'll give one tip away that the president has mentioned. He will say to that murderous former KGB colonel, that thug who runs the Russian Federation, you will negotiate now, or the aid that we have given to Ukraine thus far will look like peanuts. That's how he will force those gentlemen to come to an arrangement that stops the bloodshed.
He will tell that thug who runs Russia, so that's a Trump advisor, Seb Gorka is going to be the counterterrorism advisor, calling Vladimir Putin a thug. I thought this was the most pro-Putin regime ever. It's got Seb Gorka calling him a thug. He is, by the way, a thug. And saying Trump's going to tell Russia, if you don't come to the table for a peace plan, what we've given to Ukraine right now is going to be peanuts compared to what we're giving them. That's a grown-up foreign policy. That is a grown-up, real foreign policy. It is the sort of foreign policy that actually needs to be implemented, actually needs to be done. Now, what's so interesting here is the actual people who are pro-Russia, the Putin supporters out there, they're horrified by what Gorka said. They are absolutely horrified. But I'm sorry, America first doesn't mean Russia first. In fact, for America to be first, Russia cannot be first. For America to be first, Ukraine needs to be free. Because if Russia is allowed to expand in Ukraine, Russia is going to go from expanding in Ukraine to spreading throughout Europe. They're already trying. There are more and more warning signs. NATO is telling businesses in Europe, you need to be prepared for a war footing. You need to find out what that means. Why? They're deeply concerned with the North Koreans and the Iranians helping the Russians, let alone the Chinese. Here's the thing, and it's an unpleasant truth, but it's true. There are bad people in the world, and we're not going to get rid of the bad people. But if we can get bad people on our side instead of China's side, we're going to be better off. That's America first. You may not like to think of this way, But frankly, there are dictators in the world who are murderous, monstrous dictators. They will either be our friend or they will be China's friend. And they're more likely to be China's friend because they know if they do business with the United States under Joe Biden, like with Jimmy Carter, they're going to have to worry about human rights abuses. Well, the only reason that they can maintain power is because of their human rights abuses. If we become their friend and we say, look, it's not in our face, we just don't want you working with China, we want to have trade relations with you, well, I'm fine with that. We're not going to get these countries to conform to our values. The question is, do we want them to be on China's side or our side? And there are people like, oh, this is so distasteful. This is so bad. I can't believe you would say that. Yes. You know what? I would rather Pinochet be in South Africa or South America than the Chinese setting up shop. I would much rather an Augusto Pinochet than a communist running parts of South America. Pinochet was ruthless to the communists. You're not allowed to praise Pinochet. Pinochet was a great leader and stabilized a country and brought in free market capitalism. And to this day, it's one of the more prosperous countries in South America, but he threw the communists out of helicopters into the Pacific. You're not even allowed to make jokes about throwing commies out of helicopters. I made that joke once and was vilified and got thrown off Meet the Press. Still, I thought it was kind of funny. He literally would round up the communists, fly them out into the Pacific, and shove them out the door. He was not a good man, but he was on our side. And I would rather a Pinochet on our side than a Nicolas Maduro or Hugo Chavez or whoever the hell the leader is in Cuba these days. In the Cold War, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush understood sometimes you have to make deals with bad guys. And sometimes you have to be so willing to ruthlessly prop up your allies that the bad guys know they can't mess with the allies or they're going to be ruined. It's a grown-up foreign policy to say we're actually going to give Ukraine every weapon system they want. What Joe Biden has given them is going to look like peanuts compared to what we're going to give them. That's a grown-up foreign policy. It's what we need in this country. We are weaker today than we've ever been because we've had Barack Obama and Joe Biden defund the military, gut the military, and undermine our strong, robust foreign policy with these pipe dream fantasies that somehow we can just sit back and the rest of the world's going to get along. You know what the rest of the world has done while the United States has chosen not to lead? The rest of the world has slipped into further tyranny, and they've turned against us. I am encouraged by this team of the White House. And by the way, you should know, Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor to Donald Trump, leaving Congress, congressman from Florida, he says he's been talking to Jake Sullivan. And that American adversaries need to understand that this administration and the coming administration are largely on the same page when it comes to who our adversaries are and the extent to which we need to stop them. In fact, I am very reliably told that the current administration is blessing the current actions of the incoming administration when it comes to reaching out to foreign leaders and preparing for action in Europe. Not for a war expansion, but for a massive increase in armament for Ukraine as a way to force the Russians to have peace. Donald Trump's idea, very frankly, is this. If Russia doesn't stop the war in Ukraine, many more Russians are going to die because we will arm Ukraine to the teeth. It's exactly a grown-up foreign policy that we need, and it is in stark contrast to Joe Biden, who has said all those things, but done none of those things. Actions matter, and Trump's prepared to act, and that's a good thing. Hello, my friends. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I got to play you this Ben Rhodes exchange. Ben Rhodes, you know, they called him, what do they call him, Hamas in the Obama administration. Super hates the Israelis, loves the terrorists. Listen to this conversation on MSNBC.
That's right. I mean, hypocrisy knows no bounds. Sure. I mean, Obama would issue a pretty standard executive order, right? They would call him a dictator if he did that. They're talking about something much different than just a standard issue executive order. They've spent 4 years preparing to completely remake these agencies into ideological extensions of Donald Trump's political interest and the MAGA movement. That is a much deeper transformation of the federal government than anything that we've seen certainly in my lifetime. And I think people don't quite have their minds around that. Not only is that the fact that I worry about, the CIA, right, where they have one of these Project 2025 appointees, they operate in the shadows. If it's filled with MAGA ideologues and they can do things in the quiet, what are those people going to be up to? But I also worry about, again, like public health agencies, that are responsible for the health of our children. If they're on a radical anti-vaccine agenda, they're not just trying to say, here's an executive order to try to implement a policy like, President Obama trying to protect dreamer kids. They're talking about using executive orders to turn the U.S. government into something it has never been before, which is a deeply ideological institution. It is.
What? He thinks the United States was not turned into a deeply ideological institution when Barack Obama or Joe Biden were there. This is why. Because progressives do not believe they're ideological. Progressives never believe they're ideological, so they can say with a straight face enough to pass the truth detector test or the lie detector test that they weren't doing an ideological program. No. They were putting suing nuns to perform abortions. They were putting boys in girls' sports. They were giving illegal alien children paths to citizenship in this country. They were doing all the ideological things you would do and siding with the terrorists and the Iranians against the Jews. And they're like, we aren't ideological, and now Donald Trump wants to make it ideological. All Donald Trump wants to do is get the politics out of it. He wants to get the politics out of it. In fact, when we come back, I want to explain to you the level of politicization that the Obama and Biden regimes have engaged in Washington, D.C., so that you can understand the extent to why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing. And also talk about my discussion with Leland Vittert last night on the team of rivals that Donald Trump is putting into his cabinet. A bunch of people who do not see the world in the same way. There's going to be a lot of fighting in this cabinet. I want you to understand why when we come back. It's very important that you get this. But first, I want you to go to ericforhillsdale.com and get Imprimis. Sign up for Imprimis. It's completely free. You can get the Hillsdale College Podcast Network as well. Just go to ericforhillsdale.com. You can also watch a short video on what makes Hillsdale College unique. It's a great institution of learning. And not only is it a great institution of learning, but they give so much to Americans for free. They want you to understand and appreciate American history, not in terms of indoctrination, but in terms of education. Hillsdale College has been around since the 1800s. They have a great short video on their mission and how their honor code enforces integrity and honesty and allows for people of different views to come together respectfully. It's a very unique institution. Find out more. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today. ERICK. Watch their video on the honor code. Hillsdale College was founded in 1844, one of the first institutions in the country to integrate. It's a great institution. Go to Eric, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. Greetings, conversationalists. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be happy to have you. I want to spend a little more time on this Trump cabinet and his picks. I was on Leland Vittert's program last night on News Nation. Great show, good news network. I've enjoyed him. You know, Bill Shine from Fox, who was Roger Ailes' right-hand man, he left after Roger left. He has moved over to helping the folks at News Nation. He's also helped the folks at Old Glory Bank, by the way. It's just Bill is a salt-of-the-earth guy. And News Nation has done a very good job gaining some traction. It still doesn't have a ton of viewers compared to the other networks, but it's growing. Month over month, it's growing. And what they've done, and I very much appreciate, is that they typically don't have a bunch of panelists yelling at each other. What they do and what the staff is very obligated to do is to have on, for example, the conservative and push and probe on the conservative's arguments, and then have on the liberal and do the same thing. And a very good journalist, regardless of their biases, is able to be devil's advocate to both sides. And I enjoy my exchanges with Leland because he forces me onto my A game and I him. And last night we were talking about the Trump picks, and he was like, listen, Trump's not a conservative. He's a populist. This is arguably the most liberal cabinet a Republican's ever had. Shouldn't he be given the benefit of the doubt? And my point was, yeah, giving the benefit of the doubt. He clearly has a level of mandate of support in this country, but also as a conservative, I feel like I've got an obligation to warn some of your picks may undermine you. At the end of the day, there is not a person on planet Earth except one of those deeply committed partisans who wants to talk politics at Thanksgiving who really cares about the cabinet picks. Donald Trump is going to get the blame, and Donald Trump is going to get the credit, not a cabinet pick. At the same time, the cabinet picks, I don't think most people understand, have unique powers given by Congress to the cabinet picks that the president himself does not automatically have. So the cabinet picks are where the power is. For example, it was the labor secretary who shut down businesses across the country during COVID. It was the labor secretary who mandated COVID vaccines for companies that did business with the government. It was the labor secretary who did these things. It was the education secretary who paused student loans. It was the housing and urban development secretary who paused evictions. So these people do matter. And when you have Chavez DeRimmer and labor secretary who the left loves, who's being praised by the left, who has the votes of the Democrats in the Senate, you should be a little concerned with that person. When you have Robert Kennedy Jr., who's never met a conspiracy he didn't want to embrace, you should be concerned with a nut like Kennedy in charge of something. The man literally believes chemtrails are a thing. At the same time, as Leland and I discussed last night, one of the things that Donald Trump does, one of the things anyone who knows Donald Trump says he does, and one of the things that he clearly is doing, is he's putting a bunch of people together who are going to clash. Trump likes it. By design, Donald Trump wants to have people put together who disagree, and he can be the decider in chief. And the thing that horrifies the left, quite frankly, the thing that really, really has the left furious is that they want the bureaucracy to decide. They want the bureaucracy in charge, not the president. This is why, by the way, the left is furious with Donald Trump being president and horrified and scared, and people are fleeing the country because they don't want Donald Trump to have that power. But they don't want to strip the power from the presidency because they know there's no such thing as permanence, and they want the power back, and they want the bureaucracy to have the power. The left has decided not to have a socialist revolution in this country, but a technocratic revolution. A lot of people think we've headed towards socialism. We haven't. We've headed towards technocracy. In fact, I forget the philosopher from the 1970s who was writing about this, that the step to go for a republic like the United States after democracy was not socialism or communism, but to endow the bureaucracy with the technical expertise to make the decisions for everyone else to become like Plato's Republic. That's where we've headed. And that's why the left is upset with Trump being in charge. It's why you have a guy like Ben Rhodes on MSNBC saying that Donald Trump wants to turn the government into an ideological enterprise. Ben Rhodes wants to turn the government into an ideological enterprise. It's just progressives don't believe they have ideology. Progressives believe they're just implementing common sense reforms. The bottom line is this. If you're really concerned about the size and scope of the government, that it has gotten too powerful, that the government of the United States has burdened people too much, you should want less government. You should want less power in Washington. You should want a less powerful bureaucracy. You should want to rein it all in. My buddy Grover Norquist says all the time he wants a government so small it can be drowned in a bathtub. I'm with him. maybe drown in a teacup full of water. I don't think we'll ever get a government that small. I'm not delusional. I don't think it's going to happen. It's what I would want. But the left wants an expansionist government. They just don't want the Republicans in charge of it. And they're willing to wait out the Republicans because they understand something a lot of people on our side have forgotten. They understand that as an ideological enterprise, no matter how populist Donald Trump is as opposed to conservative, he's never going to use the government as robustly as the progressives for progressive ends. Because Donald Trump doesn't want progressive ends. Donald Trump doesn't want boys and girls sports. That's a progressive end. Donald Trump does not want socialism. That's a progressive end. And until our side, until the populists aligned with Donald Trump understand that the only way to stop the progressives from using the government for their ends is to gut the government, not to weaponize it in our favor, not to pick the winners and losers for 4 years and let the Democrats do it. Well, you got to gut it. You got to gut it. You got to get rid of it. It's one of the things I like about Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's based on the name comes from Dogecoin, the meme coin that Elon Musk backed on Twitter, and it skyrocketed, one of those cryptocurrencies. Mara Gay is a writer at the New York Times. She's on MSNBC. Notice it's all MSNBC. On MSNBC, they tell you what you want to hear if you're on the left. They want to scare you about Donald Trump, and she's talking about how bad this committee is from Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to cut government.
Well, it's not the same thing, and I actually think the Congresswoman brought up a really interesting point in terms of how this Doge or Dodge, I don't know what we've gone with, might function separately, which is essentially not only is it just loyal to Donald Trump, but it's creating government bureaucracy for the express purpose of punishing political enemies potentially and also rewarding political friends. So what kind of contract authority is it going to have? What kind of transparency is it going to have? I mean, yes, people get frustrated with government, but there are actually very strict reporting rules, especially in Congress. These congressional panels have to actually report to the public what they are doing with public money, what agencies are doing. So what kind of reporting requirements are Ramaswamy is Elon Musk and this Doge going to have? We don't actually know, but I think part of the concern is that when you create an entity, you can create your own rules. And that's really ultimately what's happening here, is that Donald Trump is kind of allowing some cronies to use government to their own ends. And I think the American people deserve to know what that's going to look like.
The Democrats do this with unions all the time, and they're never upset about it. They're just upset when Republicans learn from them and duplicate it. So Donald Trump has this very diverse, populist group of people. He's got Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, John Radcliffe in charge of the CIA. They disagree on a lot of policy issues. We've got Marco Rubio, who aligns with John Radcliffe against Tulsi Gabbard. Got Seb Gorka, and that's just for national security and foreign policy. You got Pete Hegseth in for Department of Defense. These are a group of people who are going to bitterly disagree on the future. And Donald Trump is going to listen to the arguments and make his mind up. The former Prime Minister of Australia has a peace and foreign policy. Malcolm Turnbull. He was a great conservative leader in Australia, had a great relationship with Donald Trump. Trump intended to put tariffs on Australian steel and aluminum. In a peace and foreign affairs, not foreign policy and foreign affairs, Malcolm Turnbull talks about how he convinced Donald Trump not to put tariffs on Australia. You know his selling point? Australia exported, this is him writing, a modest quantity of steel to the west coast of the United States because shipping, pay attention to this, the cost of shipping steel, almost all of it for roofing, across the Pacific from Australia to California was less than half the cost of shipping it to California from steel makers in the Midwest and the East Coast. You got that? It was cheaper, it is to this day cheaper, to ship steel all the way from Australia to California than it is to put it on a railroad and get it from the Midwest and East Coast to California. So if Donald Trump were to put a tariff on Australian steel, it would increase steel costs on the West Coast by 25%, and that would still be cheaper than getting the steel from the Midwest and the East Coast. Malcolm Turnbull used logic. He knows Trump's a businessman. He made the business case, and the result was that Australia did not get tariffs put on it. He also said, by the way, he said this, let me read you this. Second, I said that if Trump's argument for tariffs was to correct trade policy with other countries that were not fair or reciprocal, why would he impose them on Australia? Australia and the United States have maintained a free trade agreement for years. The United States enjoys a large trade surplus with Australia. No tariffs and no quotas, I said to him. In fact, it can't get any better. And you've got a $25 billion trade surplus in favor of the United States. Truth be told, you got the best trade deal ever with Australia compared to anywhere else. He made a logical case, and Trump listened. The idea from people, if you listen to MSNBC, is that Trump is some sort of irrational creature. He's not irrational. He's not irrational. You make the case to him, he understands. So Trump's putting this team of rivals together who are going to fight it out in front of him, and he's going to be the decider-in-chief. The left doesn't want Trump to be the decider-in-chief. They want the bureaucracy to decide, and the left has been embedding within the bureaucracy for decades, so the bureaucracy always reliably makes a decision that benefits the left. By gutting the bureaucracy, Trump is eliminating the power of the left. By gutting the government, Trump is eliminating the power of the left. The government needs to be gutted, because Donald Trump will only be president for 4 years. Maybe J.D. Vance gets in, but can you take the chance? Wouldn't you rather the government not be able to wield power against you or me or anyone else? And that would infuriate the left, because the left needs the power of government to advance their agenda, because their agenda is deeply unpopular with the American public. So you gut the government's ability to expand their agenda. The left itself is neutralized in this country. If you're playing to beat the left, not just to own them, but to beat them, you need to reduce the size, scope, and power of the United States government. And unfortunately, I don't know that the next 4 years are where we're going to see that happen. I hit the button so fast to go to break, I forgot to tell you guys that you should join Americans for Prosperity. They've got chapters in just about every state now. Here's interesting trivia. They knocked on over 10 million, with an M, 10 million doors during the election. In Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, the 7 swing states. Over 10 million doors knocked. It's an impressive number. They knocked on more doors than any of the other outside groups. And they just made a persuasive case for common sense conservative reform. They targeted people they thought had a high propensity to vote, and they helped win the election. And you can be a part of that movement. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. They give you all the tools and tips you need to be involved in the fight for freedom in this country. They're a great organization. I'm proud to partner with them. I got to go out to Salt Lake City in 2 weeks and do an event for them. Go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with them. They got chapters just about everywhere. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. If you would like to be a part of Americans for Prosperity, I think you would enjoy being a part of it. Now, here at the end, I want to play you this. This is a guy. He's on TikTok, of course. They're all on TikTok. And he's live streaming, and he wants to disrupt the inauguration. Listen to this guy.
All right, so let's talk about what it is that I actually mean to do on Inauguration Day. So there's going to be a lot of people there, a lot of people on his side, and a lot of people protesting on our side. I mean to meet as many people as I can, try to convince them to work together in a co-opetition. And if everything works the way that it's supposed to, I will be in front of that stage with people chanting for me to be heard. Either Legion or let him speak. Whatever, I don't care. Get me on stage to speak before the president and change the very fabric of human history.
Okay, I'm sorry, but this guy is like cosplaying hero or something out there. So I mean to change the very fabric of human history. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do cooperative competition. And we're going to get me inside the inaugural security bubble so I can get on stage and confront Donald Trump. Really. These people are such narcissists, and they brag about it on TikTok. This guy envisions him as some sort of G.I. Joe. He's going to show up, and he's going to change history because the left is going to work together to change history. No, you're not. You're just some dude with a TikTok account. We don't even know who you are. You hardly have any followers anyway. But the level of narcissism to be out there. When I was a kid, I would envision myself as a superhero. I think a lot of kids did. This guy is a grown-up man who envisions himself as a superhero and for real wants to get on TikTok and rally people to help him make it happen. This is childlike thinking by these narcissists on the left. They're going to go disrupt the inauguration of the President of the United States. I do hope that someone has advised the presidential inaugural team and the Secret Service that this narcissist is out there and wants to go disrupt this stuff. What a weirdo. This happens so much these days with these people on TikTok. They are obsessed with themselves, and they think because they have followers, they are somebody. No, you're not. You're a 20 or 30-something spectacularly unaccomplished person who just gets spectacle on social media. That's it. Grow up, start a family, live a life, contribute to the tax base, and maybe then we'll take you narcissists seriously. Good Lord. All right. You guys have a fantastic Thanksgiving. Don't burn the turkey. Make sure you've thought it out on time. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'll talk to you Monday.